Chosen one, there are moments in life when the silence of heaven feels heavier than the noise of the world. Moments when what was taken from you seemed to vanish into a dark and bottomless pit, as though injustice itself had the final word. You remember the theft, not merely of possessions, but of time, trust, reputation, opportunity, love. They thought they were clever. They believed that by removing something from your hands, they had removed power from your future. But there is a truth far older than their schemes and far stronger than their intentions. What is taken unjustly is never beyond the reach of divine restoration. You have walked through seasons where loss felt like identity. You questioned yourself in the quiet hours. You wondered whether the door that closed would ever open again. Perhaps they lied about you. Perhaps they undermined you. Perhaps they smiled in your face while quietly carrying pieces of your destiny away in their pockets. And yet, here you stand, not destroyed, not erased, not forgotten. There is something unbreakable about the chosen. It is not pride. It is not arrogance. It is a mark of purpose that cannot be scrubbed off by betrayal. They assumed your silence meant surrender. They mistook your patience for weakness. But heaven often works in hidden arithmetic. While they counted what they had taken, eternity was counting what would be returned. And divine mathematics is not bound by the small calculations of human greed. When restoration comes, it does not come timidly. It does not creep back in equal measure. It arrives with multiplication. You see, loss has a strange way of preparing the ground for increase. When something is stripped away, it creates space, and space is never empty for long. It either fills with bitterness or with promise. The chosen learn, slowly and painfully, to let it fill with promise. They learn that what was stolen was not the final chapter, but the turning of a page. What you thought was the end was merely the clearing of a field before a greater harvest. There is a sacred principle at work. Injustice is not ignored by heaven. It may appear delayed, but it is never dismissed. Those who take without right believe that time will protect them. They believe that if enough days pass, their actions will fade into irrelevance. But time does not erase truth, it reveals it. And when truth stands in full light, restoration follows close behind. Imagine the shock of those who thought you were finished. They expected you to shrink. They expected your influence to wither. They expected the theft to define you. Yet the very act that was meant to diminish you has refined you. Loss carved depth into your character. Betrayal sharpened your discernment. Waiting strengthened your endurance. The thing they stole was valuable, yes, but what it produced in you is priceless. Restoration tenfold is not merely about material return. It is about authority restored, peace restored, dignity restored. It is about doors opening that you did not even know existed. Sometimes what is returned does not resemble what was taken, because it is greater. A relationship lost may be replaced by a destiny discovered. A position removed may give birth to a calling revealed. The multiplication is not always numerical. It is dimensional. You must understand this. The chosen are not preserved from loss, but they are preserved through it. There is a difference. Loss may touch your life, but it cannot anchor itself there permanently. It is a visitor, not a resident. And when it leaves, it often leaves behind wisdom, resilience, and a strange and steady confidence that no theft can permanently impoverish a soul aligned with purpose. There were nights when you thought nothing was happening, but unseen processes were unfolding. Seeds were germinating beneath the soil of disappointment, and seeds do not shout while they grow. They break open quietly. They push upward invisibly. Then one day, what was hidden becomes undeniable. The restoration will not ask permission to be noticed. It will stand before your adversaries as a testimony that what is marked by heaven cannot be erased by man. Do not be surprised if the return feels overwhelming. When tenfold increase arrives, it often stretches the very capacity of the one receiving it. You may feel unprepared. You may feel humbled. You may even feel a holy astonishment. But remember, the preparation was happening in the season of loss. Every tear was tutoring you. Every delay was disciplining you. Every closed door was redirecting you. They stole from you, thinking they were taking your advantage. In truth, they were triggering your advancement. For there is a mystery in divine restoration. It does not simply replace, it elevates. It does not merely give back, it upgrades. What returns carries with it the weight of justice and the fragrance of grace. Chosen one, stand steady. The story is not written in the ink of theft, but in the gold of restoration. What was taken is not lost beyond recovery. It is being prepared for return in a form that will silence doubt and vindicate faith. And when it arrives, multiplied, magnified, unmistakable, you will understand that nothing entrusted to purpose can ever be permanently stolen. Chosen one, there are moments in life when the silence of heaven feels heavier than the noise of the world. There are hours when prayers seem to rise only to fall back upon your own shoulders, unanswered and unexplained. In such moments, what was taken from you feels not merely absent, but erased, as though injustice has rewritten your story without permission. You replay the memory of the loss in your mind. You remember the day it shifted, the conversation that changed everything, the betrayal that rearranged your trust. It was not only something in your hands that disappeared, it was something in your heart that felt torn away. What makes the theft so painful is not always its size, but its meaning. Perhaps it was an opportunity you labored for in obscurity. Perhaps it was a relationship you guarded with sincerity. Perhaps it was your reputation, quietly chipped away by whispers you never authorized. Whatever it was, it represented time, hope, and faith invested. And when it was taken, it felt as though a portion of your future had been confiscated. The silence that followed was deafening. You expected a swift correction, an immediate balancing of scales. Instead, there was stillness. But silence is not absence. The heavens are often most active when they appear most quiet. The chosen learn this not through theory, but through endurance. The quiet season is not proof of abandonment. It is often the workshop of restoration. What feels like emptiness may actually be preparation. What feels like delay may actually be design. There is a deeper rhythm at work, one that does not rush to satisfy human impatience. You see, when something is stolen unjustly, it exposes more than the wrongdoing of others. It reveals the architecture of your own soul. Loss tests what you truly believe about justice, about purpose, about the unseen hand that guides your path. It asks whether your confidence was rooted in the gift or in the giver. And this question, though uncomfortable, is transformative. For if your faith survives theft, it becomes unshakable. If your hope survives delay, it becomes luminous. The world measures loss by subtraction. It counts what is missing and declares the remainder insufficient. But divine mathematics does not follow the same formula. What is taken unjustly is not simply removed from your ledger. It is transferred into a different account, one that accrues unseen interest. While you mourn what has vanished, there are processes unfolding beyond your sight. Justice is not idle. It is patient. It is important to understand that the chosen are not spared from injustice. In fact, purpose often attracts resistance. There is something about destiny that unsettles those who operate from envy or fear. When they sense potential in you, they may attempt to intercept it. They may imagine that by disrupting your progress, they can secure their own position. Yet what they fail to grasp is that destiny is not fragile. It cannot be permanently derailed by interference. It may detour, but it does not disappear. In the silence, you may have questioned yourself. You may have wondered if you misheard the promise, if you misjudged the path. Doubt is a natural companion in seasons of loss. But doubt is not the author of your story. It is only a passing voice. The deeper truth remains steady. What is aligned with divine purpose cannot be permanently stolen. It may be withheld for a time. It may be refined through adversity. But it is not erased. There is also a hidden mercy in the silence. Immediate restoration might satisfy your emotions, but delayed restoration strengthens your character. Waiting builds endurance. Endurance builds depth, and depth prepares you for increase. If everything were returned instantly, you might receive it with the same capacity you had before. But through loss, your capacity expands. Through waiting, your discernment sharpens. Through silence, your roots grow deeper. Consider this. If what was taken was truly meant for you, then its absence is temporary. And if it was not meant for you, then its removal is protection. In either case, the silence serves a purpose. It either prepares you to receive what will return, or redirects you towards something greater. The chosen do not cling desperately to what has been stolen. They learn to trust that what belongs to them by design will find its way back by destiny. The silence of heaven is not indifference. It is intention. It is the calm before revelation, the pause before restoration begins to surface. You may not see the movement yet, but unseen hands are arranging circumstances. Unseen conversations are unfolding. Unseen doors are being aligned with your future. The theft that wounded you has not escaped notice. It has been recorded in a ledger far more precise than human memory. And so, in this quiet season, resist the temptation to define yourself by what is missing. You are not the sum of what was taken. You are the bearer of purpose that transcends temporary loss. The silence you endure today will one day amplify the testimony of your restoration. For when what was stolen returns, multiplied, refined, unmistakable, you will look back at this heavy quiet and recognize it not as abandonment, but as the sacred interval before justice spoke. They assumed your silence meant surrender. They watched you step back and mistook it for retreat. In their minds, quietness equaled defeat. When you did not argue publicly, when you did not chase them down to demand what was yours, when you did not broadcast your pain for sympathy, they concluded that you had accepted the loss. But what they could not see was the strength it took to remain still. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is I plan. Sometimes it is the refusal to fight a battle on a lower level than your calling. The chosen understand something that the impatient rarely grasp. Not every theft must be confronted immediately, to be corrected eventually. There is a confidence that grows in those who trust divine justice. It is not loud. It does not boast. It simply rests in the assurance that truth does not require constant defense. When you refuse to scramble, when you decline to match their aggression with aggression, you were not conceding ground. You were standing on higher ground. They expected a reaction. They anticipated anger. They prepared for retaliation. And when it did not come, they felt empowered. They thought your restraint was evidence that you had no strength left. But restraint is often the clearest evidence of strength. It takes far more power to hold back than to lash out. Anyone can shout. Anyone can accuse. But to remain composed when wronged requires a deeper anchoring. What they did not understand is that you were not silent because you were empty. You were silent because you were anchored. You had learned that constant defense can entangle you in the very chaos you seek to escape. By refusing to engage in every accusation or rumor, you preserved your clarity. You preserved your peace. And peace is not a small thing. It is a weapon in its own right. There is a peculiar dignity in quiet endurance. It unsettles those who expect you to crumble. When you continue forward without bitterness, when you build without announcing every injustice, when you smile without pretending the wound never happened, you create a tension in the minds of those who tried to diminish you. They begin to wonder whether they miscalculated. They begin to sense that perhaps they did not take as much as they thought. Silence also creates space for revelation. Had you reacted impulsively, you might have obscured the truth with noise. But by stepping back, by allowing time to pass, you gave circumstances the opportunity to unfold. Truth has a way of surfacing when it is not constantly smothered by argument. Lies require maintenance. Deception demands energy, and eventually, those who construct false narratives grow weary of sustaining them. In your restraint, you allowed their own inconsistencies to expose themselves. Yet your silence was not passive. It was active trust. You continued to work. You continued to grow. You continued to refine your craft, your character, your vision. While they watched for your collapse, you were quietly expanding. This is the paradox of the chosen. What looks like stillness is often preparation. What appears to be stagnation is often strengthening. Roots grow downward before branches stretch upward. And roots are formed in hidden places. There were nights when the temptation to respond was strong. You imagined what you might say. You rehearsed the defense you could deliver. But something deeper restrained you. A quiet conviction whispered that your story did not require frantic explanation, that your integrity, lived consistently, would speak louder than any counterattack. This restraint was not cowardice. It was wisdom. Over time, the absence of your reaction began to shift the atmosphere. Those who once believed the narrative against you started noticing gaps. They observed your steadiness. They saw that you were not unraveling. And in that contrast, questions emerged. How could someone so accused remain so composed? How could someone so wronged continue so faithfully? Your silence became a mirror reflecting the instability of falsehood. It is important to understand that silence does not mean you felt no pain. You felt it deeply. You processed it privately. You wrestled with it in prayer and reflection. But you refused to let pain dictate your posture. Instead of allowing bitterness to define you, you allowed growth to refine you. And growth, though quiet, is powerful. There is also a sacred timing to vindication. Immediate defense may soothe pride, but delayed vindication strengthens character. When justice unfolds gradually, it is more thorough. It reaches deeper. It corrects not only the surface accusation but the underlying assumptions. Your silence made room for a fuller restoration. Now, as circumstances begin to shift, as doors begin to open again, as clarity replaces confusion, it becomes evident that your restraint was not in vain. The ground you refused to fight over has become the foundation for greater ground. The dignity you preserved has become your distinguishing mark. And those who once interpreted your silence as surrender are beginning to see it for what it truly was: strength under control. Chosen one, never underestimate the power of composed endurance. Your quiet season was not a sign of defeat, but of discipline. You did not need to shout to prove your worth. You did not need to scramble to secure what was destined for you. Your silence was not the end of your influence. It was the protection of it. And as restoration begins to take shape, it will be clear that what looked like surrender was, in truth, strategy guided by something far greater than impulse. You see, loss has a strange way of preparing the ground for increase. At first glance, it feels like erosion. Something valuable is stripped away, leaving the landscape of your life exposed and vulnerable. The wind seems harsher. The nights seem longer. You look at the empty space where something once stood and wonder how emptiness could possibly serve a purpose. Yet there is a mystery hidden within subtraction. When something is removed, it creates room. And room, though uncomfortable at first, is the birthplace of expansion. Consider how tightly we hold the things we cherish. We build our routines around them. We anchor our expectations to them. We imagine our future with them firmly in place. So when they are taken, it feels not only like loss, but like disorientation. The familiar structure collapses, and we are left standing in unfamiliar territory. But what if the structure had become too small for the next chapter? What if the very thing you were grieving was limiting the scale of what you were meant to receive? Loss disrupts comfort. It forces reflection. It exposes dependencies we did not realize we had. When something is stripped away, we are compelled to ask deeper questions. Who am I without this? What remains when this is gone? And in answering those questions, we often discover strengths that had been dormant. We uncover resilience we did not know we possessed. The ground that seemed barren begins, slowly, to reveal hidden fertility. There is a reason seeds must be buried before they grow. Burial looks like ending. It looks like disappearance. But within the soil, transformation is taking place. The seed breaks open, not as a sign of failure, but as the beginning of multiplication. In much the same way, when loss breaks you open, it may be initiating growth, rather than signaling destruction. The breaking is not the conclusion. It is the commencement of something larger than what existed before. It is also true that increase requires capacity. You cannot pour abundance into a vessel already filled to the brim. Sometimes what feels like theft is actually the clearing of space. The removal of one opportunity makes room for a greater one. The ending of one relationship opens the path to a more aligned connection. The loss of one position forces you to discover a calling that had been quietly waiting beneath the surface. The space created by loss becomes the chamber where expansion is formed. This does not mean the pain is imaginary. It is real. It stings. It unsettles. But pain and purpose are not mutually exclusive. Often, they travel together. The chosen are not shielded from the ache of loss, but they are shaped by it. Each disappointment chisels away at fear. Each setback refines intention. Each closed door strengthens discernment. The ground that was once crowded with distractions becomes open for clarity. When something is taken unjustly, it can also awaken a deeper hunger. Not a hunger for revenge, but a hunger for growth. You begin to realize that your worth was never confined to what you held in your hands. It was rooted in who you are becoming. And who you are becoming is often forged in the fire of absence. When comfort is removed, creativity awakens. When certainty dissolves, faith stretches. When security wavers, courage rises. There is also an unseen pruning that occurs in seasons of loss. Just as a gardener trims branches to stimulate healthier growth, life sometimes removes what appears fruitful to make room for what will be abundant. Pruning is precise. It is intentional. It is never random. And though it may feel severe in the moment, it ultimately strengthens the tree. In the same way, the removal of certain elements from your life may be preparing you to bear fruit beyond what you previously imagined. You may not recognize the increase while you are still standing in the emptiness. It often begins subtly. A new idea forms. A new connection emerges. A new confidence takes root. What was once a void becomes a workshop. The silence becomes strategic. The absence becomes fertile. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, what seemed like a setback transforms into a launching point. The remarkable truth is that the very space created by loss becomes the evidence of growth. You look back and realize that, doth nothing been taken, you would not have stretched. Had everything remained comfortable, you would not have expanded. The loss that once felt cruel becomes the catalyst for multiplication. The field that seemed stripped becomes the site of a greater harvest. Chosen one, do not despise the open spaces in your life. Do not rush to fill them with substitutes that merely resemble what was lost. Allow the ground to breathe. Allow the soil to settle. For in that quiet, unseen preparation is unfolding. The removal was not the end of your story, but the widening of its scope. What was taken made room for what is coming. And what is coming will not merely replace what you lost, it will exceed it in scale, depth, and significance. There is a sacred principle at work that many overlook in the haste of disappointment. Injustice is never ignored by heaven. It may appear delayed. It may seem as though wrong has been granted permission to flourish unchecked. But delay is not dismissal. Silence is not approval. There exists a moral architecture woven into the fabric of reality, and within it, every act carries consequence. Those who take what is not theirs may celebrate briefly, but they are celebrating on borrowed time. When something is stolen from you, whether tangible or intangible, it can feel as though the scales of justice have been permanently tipped. You may look around and see no immediate correction, no swift reversal, no visible reckoning. This absence of immediate response can be more unsettling than the theft itself. It tempts you to believe that fairness is fragile, that righteousness is naive, that integrity is optional. But such conclusions are born from impatience, not truth. Justice operates on a different clock. Human systems may falter, institutions may overlook, people may misunderstand, but there is a deeper accounting that does not forget. Every word spoken in malice, every scheme crafted in secrecy, every advantage taken through deception is recorded in a ledger more precise than any human record. The chosen must learn to trust that this accounting is active, even when invisible. It is tempting to seek immediate vindication. There is a natural desire to see wrong corrected swiftly, publicly, unmistakably. Yet instant justice often addresses only the surface. Delayed justice, though more difficult to endure, reaches deeper. It untangles complexities. It exposes motives. It allows truth to surface in ways that cannot be easily disputed. When correction comes through time rather than impulse, it carries greater weight. Those who commit injustice often rely on urgency. They assume that if they move quickly enough, manipulate cleverly enough, or intimidate persistently enough, they can outrun consequence. They mistake temporary advantage for permanent victory. But advantage secured through wrongdoing is inherently unstable. It requires constant maintenance. It depends on continued deception. And deception is exhausting. Over time, cracks form, stories contradict, alliances weaken. The very structure built on dishonesty begins to tremble under its own weight. Meanwhile, you may feel forgotten. You may wonder whether your restraint has been mistaken for irrelevance. You may question whether integrity is worth the cost. Yet integrity is not an investment that yields immediate applause. It is a foundation that supports long-term elevation. What feels like being overlooked is often protection from premature exposure. What feels like being delayed is often preparation for sustainable increase. There is also a refining work taking place within you during this waiting. If justice were immediate, you might celebrate externally but remain unchanged internally. Delayed restoration shapes your character. It teaches you patience without passivity, hope without denial, endurance without bitterness. It trains your heart to remain steady even when circumstances are unsteady. This inner strengthening ensures that when restoration arrives, you are capable of stewarding it wisely. It is crucial to remember that justice is not always dramatic. It does not always announce itself with spectacle. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, through shifts in perception, through the gradual unraveling of false narratives. Those who once believed the lie begin to question it. Those who once doubted your integrity begin to reconsider. Doors that seemed permanently closed begin to open, not with force, but with quiet inevitability. And as this unfolding occurs, you may notice something remarkable. You are no longer driven by the need to prove yourself. The urgency that once consumed you begins to dissolve. You recognize that truth does not require frantic defense. It stands on its own strength. Your role is not to force vindication, but to remain faithful. Faithfulness, over time, becomes its own testimony. There is also mercy woven into this process. Justice does not merely punish wrongdoing. It restores balance. It ensures that what was taken unjustly does not remain permanently displaced. It repositions you. It recalibrates circumstances. It aligns outcomes with purpose. And when this recalibration is complete, the result is often greater than what was originally lost. Not because suffering was deserved, but because endurance has expanded your capacity. You may one day look back at the season of apparent injustice and recognize it as a corridor rather than a prison, a passageway rather than a dead end. The waiting that once felt suffocating will appear strategic. The delay that once felt cruel will reveal itself as careful orchestration. For in that interval, unseen hands were arranging restoration in a manner more comprehensive than you could have engineered yourself. Chosen one, do not confuse temporary imbalance with permanent defeat. The scales may appear tilted, but they are not broken. What has been recorded will be addressed. What has been taken will be accounted for. Justice is not hurried, but it is certain. And when it unfolds, it will not merely correct the wrong, it will confirm that your endurance was not in vain, and that integrity, though tested, remains undefeated. Do not be surprised if the return feels overwhelming. When restoration finally begins to unfold, it rarely arrives in the modest, measured way you once imagined. After so long adjusting to absence, you may have trained your expectations to remain small. You may have learned to survive on less, to hope cautiously, to brace yourself against disappointment. And then, suddenly, doors begin to open with a force that startles you. Opportunities align, favor reappears, clarity replaces confusion. What was once withheld seems to rush towards you all at once. There is a peculiar disorientation that accompanies answered waiting. You become so accustomed to endurance that increase feels unfamiliar. For months, perhaps years, you carried the weight of loss. You built strength in scarcity. You found discipline in delay. And now, as restoration approaches, it stretches muscles you did not know you possessed. It requires you to expand your vision again. It asks you to receive without fear. Sometimes the return does not resemble the original loss. In fact, it often surpasses it in ways you could not have anticipated. What you once grieved may come back refined, enlarged, transformed. A position lost may return as leadership beyond what you previously held. A relationship broken may give way to connections more aligned with your purpose. A reputation attacked may be restored with greater credibility than before. The multiplication is not merely numerical, it is qualitative. It carries depth, wisdom, and authority forged through endurance. Yet with increase comes responsibility. Restoration is not only a gift, it is a stewardship. The same character that sustained you in loss must sustain you in abundance. It would be easy to allow vindication to turn into pride, to let relief become arrogance. But the chosen are marked not merely by what they receive, but by how they carry it. The humility learned in hardship becomes the safeguard in elevation. There is also a quiet astonishment that often accompanies multiplied return. You may find yourself reflecting on the journey, remembering nights of doubt, recalling moments when you nearly gave up. The contrast between then and now feels almost surreal, but this contrast is intentional. It anchors gratitude deep within you. It reminds you that what you now hold was not secured by frantic striving, but by faithful endurance. Those who once doubted may now observe in silence. Those who once underestimated may now reconsider. But by the time restoration becomes visible, you are no longer driven by the need for their acknowledgement. The journey has matured you beyond the craving for validation. The return itself is enough. Not because it proves others wrong, but because it confirms that purpose was never truly threatened. There is something else that happens when restoration comes tenfold. It heals more than the original wound. The increase does not simply replace what was taken. It repairs the internal fracture left behind. Confidence returns, not as fragile optimism, but as tested assurance. Peace settles in, not as temporary calm, but as rooted stability. You are no longer the same person who first experienced the loss. You have been enlarged inwardly, and now your outward circumstances begin to match that inward expansion. It is important to recognize that overwhelming restoration is not accidental. It is the culmination of unseen processes. Every moment you chose integrity over retaliation. Every day you continued forward despite discouragement. Every time you refused to let bitterness define you. All of it contributed to this moment. The increase is not random generosity. It is aligned response. It is the fruit of perseverance meeting divine timing. As you step into this new season, you may feel both gratitude and caution. Gratitude for what has returned, caution to ensure it is not mishandled. This balance is healthy. It keeps you aware that restoration is not the end of growth, but the continuation of it. The same discipline that carried you through loss will now carry you through abundance. And perhaps the most profound realization will be this: nothing was ever truly lost beyond recovery. What felt permanent was temporary. What felt final was transitional. The theft that once defined your pain now highlights your progress. You stand not merely restored, but strengthened, not merely compensated, but elevated. Chosen one, receive what is returning without apology. Do not shrink to accommodate the comfort of those who misjudged you. Do not minimize the magnitude of what has been multiplied in your favor. You endured the refining. You walked through the silence. You trusted through the delay. Now, as restoration unfolds in ways that exceed your former expectations, allow yourself to step fully into it. The return may feel overwhelming, but it is not excessive. It is aligned. It is measured by a wisdom greater than your own calculations. And as you move forward carrying what has been restored, expanded, refined, undeniable, you will understand that the season of loss was never the closing of your story. It was the preparation for a restoration so complete that even you will stand in quiet wonder at its scale.